Hey everyone, welcome. Today is Friday, February 2nd. It's the last chapter of the book that we're going through, chapter 12, the frequently asked questions. So this is a great chapter with kind of most questions that people ask, a lot of the ones that I hear a lot. And so I'm going to share my screen. I've done some slides again for that. Oh, for some reason, I'm like, where's the button? Here it is. All right. Okay, here we go. Present. So, frequently asked questions. Um, what about, I'll start with what they are. What about asthma, ulcerative colitis, or rheumatoid arthritis? Can these be forms of mind-body syndrome? So he says he basically divides diseases or pain diagnoses into three categories. There are some, he's not the kind of person that's like, everything is going to be cured by mind body. So he really focuses on the ones that are purely mind body. And if it's something like cancer, strokes, and heart attacks, he has those as primarily degenerative physical conditions. So usually they're seen later in life. Of course, cancer and stroke, actually even strokes can occur in utero. Um, so degenerative meaning, you know, it gets worse over time. And he does say, although the mind plays a role in all illnesses, these are not primarily caused by thoughts or emotions, nor can they reliably be cured by changing our thoughts and emotions. So, cancer, strokes, and heart attacks may have some kind of emotional component, but he doesn't really, you know, promote using this work to totally heal from it, even though it may help some of your symptoms and may help some of the pain that you have from these conditions. Um, and especially with something like cancer, it's interesting because you can hear about some people that their cancer is in remission because they've changed some of their lifestyle things and the emotions and how they're putting pressure on themselves. But just in general, he wouldn't say like absolutely, first line of treatment for cancer is just this mind body approach, right? It could be in addition to what you're doing. And then the second category can occur in younger people and have clear evidence of tissue destruction, yet also seem to be significantly influenced by the mind. So this would be things like asthma, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, and other immune-related disorders. So for me personally, I started with ulcerative colitis. That's what actually brought me to this work. And John Sarno, he was like back in the 60s, I think, 60s or 70s, and he did say in his book that ulcerative colitis was something mind body. So I actually had that belief of like, oh, I could be cured by doing this approach. And so I think that's part of what worked so well for me. And now my ulcerative colitis is in remission. But he does say like there's tissue destruction with some of these, right? With these. And so you won't necessarily expect that the tissue destruction, once it's happened, can be reversed. And I know when they've done my colonoscopies, they said there's scarring there, but there's no active disease. So it could be possible to reduce or eliminate exacerbations of these disorders. So definitely still, uh, have medical care in addition to doing this work. But definitely there is a connection between the brain and the immune system. Psychoneuroimmunology is the research that studies that. So, doing the mind body work can not only calm the danger signal, but in some people also modulate the immune system to turn off autoimmune responses. So, autoimmune at first, I think even in the first version of his book, well, I have the third edition. I don't know about the first, but he didn't talk quite as much as about autoimmune being something that could be helped by this process. It's kind of like if you have autoimmune, you're not really in the category. But this category too, where it really could be affected by doing this work. And for me, I mean, I just know I was so stressed out all the time. I was so critical of myself. I was never really in that rest and repair state. So changing those things shut off that autoimmune response. So for people with these autoimmune disorders, it seems reasonable to use a combination of medical treatments and mind-body therapies. Okay. And then the third category is it's just pure mind-body syndrome and all of its varied manifestations. And remember, this can be anything from neck pain, back pain, shoulder pain, leg pain, to things like IBS, fibromyalgia, tinnitus, anxiety, depression. So he has that list, I think it's in chapter 1, of commonly caused mind-body syndromes. And I think that list just keeps expanding as they do more research. Okay, question 2. I've read that migraine headaches and fibromyalgia are genetic diseases. If that's true, how can they be caused by mind-body syndrome? So there are genetic factors. Some people have genes that would cause a higher likelihood of them to have a condition. But we actually know that through epigenetics, genes can be turned on and turned off during our lifetime. So in migraine headaches, fibromyalgia, anxiety, and other disorders that I include under MBS, genetic factors account for only 15 to 40% of the likelihood of developing these disorders. So yeah, there could be a genetic factor, but it doesn't mean that you will get it. It's a combination of what's going on with genetics and environment, right? So the genes do not cause the disorders, but they could make it more likely to develop them if they're put in the situation in their life that triggers MBS. So stressful events in childhood, emotional stressors later in life. But with this work, those genes can turn back off. So your genes are constantly turning on and off depending on your stress level and environment. And so doing this work can actually reverse that, genetic component. I mean, of course, you'll still have the genes for it, but they're turned off rather than turned on. And another thing I just think about too is, when we talk about genetic factors, not only are we getting our genes from parents, but we're also usually, most people are raised in that environment with those parents that, there might be certain ways of thinking that cause mind-body syndrome, right? You develop some of those personality traits that your parents might have. I know I came from a very anxious family, like incredibly anxious family. And so I probably already had the genes for it. Plus, everything I heard in my conditioning growing up was like, you've got to be good at things. The world is dangerous. You need to be perfect, right? So just thinking of it even that way, the environment you're raised in, if you have, a bunch of people that have had heart attacks, you might be more likely to have something like that just because you hear about it so much and you are worried. And we know that stress can cause, more of these problems. So I get the impression from what I've read that understanding the mind-body syndrome process is all that's necessary for healing. And for me, this does not seem to be enough. Understanding the process and uncovering the unconscious traumas or stressors seems to be only part of the puzzle because this has not led to improvement in my symptoms. So someone who's like, hey, I understand it, but I still have symptoms. So Dr. Schubiner says knowledge about mind-body syndrome is enough to eliminate pain in approximately 10 to 15% of patients in his experience. So that's the book cure, right? We all hear about the person who they read the book and their pain was gone after that. And that's the minority, right? Only 10 to 15%. And some people they might have that book cure, but because they haven't resolved the underlying things going on, they have other symptoms that come up later. So I was just coaching someone last night that was like, I'm so frustrated by these book cures and people who, they just within 1 week, they're all better. And just know that's a minority of the people. And it doesn't necessarily mean they're cured forever, because most likely they have those proponents that led to their first chronic pain episode or whatever. And so it'll kind of show up someplace else. So, so sometimes it's enough to eliminate the pain just by knowledge. Other people eliminate MBS symptoms by reducing their level of fear and learning to move forward with their lives. Mind-body syndrome is caused by unresolved emotions, and it's usually necessary to resolve them to get better. And many people need to actually make changes in their lives in order for these symptoms to go away. And I wanted to read, like, I really love, it's in one of the first couple chapters, he gives this testimonial from a woman who had fibromyalgia. And what she says is she learned to fully express her emotions for the first time in her life, finally decided to stand up for herself and not let everyone walk all over her, and to make some decisions to do things she wanted to do rather than continually acceding to others' desires. So that's kind of what he's talking about with those life changes. It's a whole lifestyle change. If you've been a people pleaser for 40 years, just this knowledge about mind-body syndrome probably won't change your symptoms until you start standing up for yourself more and being more in alignment with who you are, and getting out of those nervous system states, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, that sometimes requires some changes and conversations with people, or even changing situations in your life. If everyone, everyone gets pain from time to time, how will I know if pain is really mind-body syndrome or something that requires medical attention? This is such a common question. Do I need to be concerned that I'll hurt myself if I exercise again? So it's confusing, right? Because we hear about this symptom imperative and extinction burst stuff, that we know that as we're healing, our mind will create new symptoms for us. That's just something that happens with mostly everyone. So how do I know if I just have to go run to the doctor with every new pain? And clues that it's actually mind-body syndrome and not an actual injury is that it occurs without any injury. So even if you're like exercising and you don't feel it till later that day or a day later, when you were exercising, you didn't get injured if it didn't get hurt, right? So it occurs when other mind-body syndrome pain gets better. That's a good clue, right? Like my back pain is less, but now I have more anxiety and insomnia, or now I have more jaw pain or something. Or it occurs after some stress or emotion. So just really be skeptical of any of those new pains and look for some of this evidence that it's probably mind body. And then pain that does occur while exercising, it's often hard to know for sure. But generally, if you do even have an injury, it will start healing immediately. It starts healing within a few days or so. So if it does heal within a few days, then you could just say, maybe that was a mild injury, or maybe it was even that fear about exercising that caused it. But regardless, give it a few days before you're really stressing out. If it persists for a longer time than expected for a mild injury, then it's probably mind-body syndrome. So investigate the symptom. So see if it varies with stress. That's a good clue, right? If it's inconsistent with a physical injury, like being better at times or worse at times, unrelated to movements or activities. So just be that detective for the opposite. That's what they call it, incurable. And I really like calling it that. So you're just like looking for clues all the time. And I've had examples where my back has flared, if you want to call it that. And just from like picking up something really light. So I'm like, I don't think I actually injured it. It was an empty cooler, so I don't think it was injured. And then I just started really being detective for the opposite. And I noticed, first of all, that it wasn't hurting all the time. In certain positions, it wouldn't hurt. And usually it was if I would stand up really quickly. And so I actually caught myself a couple times. Once I just ran to get the door and I realized, oh, I didn't have pain that time. And then once someone was helping me unload some groceries, like a curbside pickup, and it looked like the lady was kind of struggling. So I just go and grab the big dog food thing and put it in my car. And then I realized that didn't hurt when I did it. So you kind of have to really be like a detective from the movies that's like always has their notepad in their pocket and they're like always looking for clues and you're writing them down. Like that kind of detective for the opposite can be so helpful. And then just in general, build up the amount of exercise you do gradually, and you should have no problem as long as you keep reminding yourself that your body is strong and healthy and that it can tolerate exercise without any problems. And one thing I really have seen, and Dr. Schubiner talks about, is that people start really viewing themselves as fragile. And, if I do anything, it's going to hurt, or I'm just the kind of person that, is so clumsy and I get hurt all the time. I'm a fragile flower. If you're describing yourselves in some of those ways, then really be on the lookout for those beliefs that you have about yourself. And he says normal things like just turning over in bed or, mild exercise, just those types of things, especially if you're building up gradually, those will not cause an injury. It may cause some pain from the fear, but that's a good clue that it's not an injury if it, was just kind of a normal daily activity. Question: why is it so important to believe that the program will work? What if I'm skeptical? Will that undermine my likelihood of success? So he says all treatment regimens, including exercise, medications, and surgery, work better if the patient believes in them. That's the placebo effect. We just know the more you believe something's going to work, the higher chance it is going to work for you. But also remember, this program is not a placebo. It's based on research, and it's just good medicine, finding the source of the problem and dealing with it in a straightforward and powerful manner. So it's not like you just have to believe for it to work, because it is also based on science. So definitely it will be more difficult to be cured if you don't believe that mind-body syndrome explains why you have your pain. And this is a big thing that I see, is that when people do get their pain, they're like, something structural must be going on because it hurts so bad. This could not possibly just be produced by my brain. There's got to be something structural. And then that will, make your progress a little slower, right? If you keep questioning that. So the neural circuits of pain are in the subconscious mind, and they're reinforced by worry, fear, and uncertainty. So, what you can do to help this is clearly understand that the source of pain is due to MBS, that emotional reactions to stress have caused the pain, and that mental processes can reverse the pain. So that's where it goes back to that belief. And he has those chapters where you can, go into detail of proving to yourself that it's mind body. And you might want to revisit those chapters if you're having a hard time with belief. Should I stop taking my pain medications for this program to work? What about medication for depression or anxiety? So it's fine to take medication for pain, anxiety, or depression while you're working on the program. In fact, for many people, it would cause a lot of fear to think of getting off their medications, and the brain will increase symptoms when you have more fear. So if you are really, really worried about stopping your medication, but also worried if this will work for you, then keep on the medication, keep doing this work. And then as your fear and your pain gets less, you can talk to your doctor about tapering. And then there's the nocebo effect, which is the opposite of the placebo effect. So if you are like, it's going to hurt really bad if I stop, then if you are believing that and stop your medications, it probably will hurt worse. Or if your doctor says your condition is uncurable, then we can produce more pain. Oftentimes, it's been shown in research that when people get a diagnosis, their pain goes up. So just knowing there's this nocebo effect. So if you decide to reduce a medication dose, make sure you remind yourself that lowering the dose will not harm you and that you are safe and confident you'll be okay. This will prevent your brain from activating the nocebo response. So I've definitely seen people do this very effectively. And if you're really stressed about getting off your medicine, it sounds like it's not the time to do that. But as you do this work and gain a little more confidence, I call it like training wheels. When you're starting, you need to have those training wheels probably. Without it, you'd be falling all over the place. And it feels good to have those training wheels and you have this extra support. But then at some point, you might want to go off road and you might want to go on different surfaces, and the training wheels are holding you back. And so thinking of it as like, once I feel like I'm really strong and steady with this, then I'll naturally want to take off those training wheels. So that's how I usually see it happen. Question. I've been told I need physical therapy in order to stretch and strengthen my body. Should I continue it, or will that deflect attention from the mind-body syndrome to something physical? What about exercise? How much should I do? And what about posture? There's like a bunch of questions there. And just in general, the strength and the symmetry or the posture is not what's causing mind-body syndrome. What holds people back is pain and fear of pain. So if you have a lot of fear of pain, work through the fear and pain by gradually increasing the amount of exercise that you do. And that could be just starting with like 2 minutes of walking one week. And then the next week you do 3 minutes of walking. And the next week you do 4 minutes of walking, like that. It could be slow like that. And if you're doing PT, that can be helpful because your PT might help you get the exercises that feel good to your body and that give you this confidence. But you want to tell yourself frequently that your body is strong, that you're healthy, there's nothing wrong with your body, and that you're doing it to get stronger. If your physical therapist reinforces the idea there's something wrong with your muscles or joints, then that can delay your recovery. So find a PT who understands that not every pain means tissue injury and who understands chronic pain. And if not, you could go to a trainer because they won't have as much of that belief probably of, anytime you have pain, it's a signal that your alignment is off or your posture is bad or whatever. And I can tell you, because, I was trained as a physical therapist over 20 years ago, and we only had about like 4 hours of chronic pain training and, over the course of 2 years. And now they are training physical therapists with from 40 to over 100 hours of chronic pain education, talking about what they call it is central sensitization. The central nervous system is highly sensitized, and that's why we have this pain even long after a tissue injury has healed. But if you go to probably the majority of physical therapists don't know this kind of stuff because either they were trained a while ago or they haven't really gotten into the chronic pain mindset. So definitely you can find people out there that do both. But if you're having a lot of fear of damage or not being strong enough or that causing your pain, then maybe physical therapy is reinforcing your fear and causing more pain. So I generally just tell people, how does physical therapy feel for you? Do you feel more like calm and secure and you know you're doing what is good for you, or do you have a lot of fear about it? Because if you have a lot of fear going in, chances are you're going to make your pain worse. And then posture is really something interesting too. They've really debunked those beliefs that posture is what causes pain. You can see many, many people with poor posture and weak core muscles and weak glutes and all this stuff that don't have chronic pain. So that was just kind of something we were always assuming and saying, but I've seen so many people that get so hung up on their posture, they're so anxious about their posture, they're actually creating pain because they're always checking in with their body. Is my posture perfect? It's another form of this perfectionism, right? That's one of these personality traits. So our bodies are made to be used. They're not actually damaged by poor posture. And it can be uncomfortable to be in one position for an extended period of time. But when you change your posture and move about, the body's reset and any symptoms go away. So it doesn't mean you want to sit in really uncomfortable positions for too long because that's just not comfortable. So use your, kind of intuition and your just general common sense. But persistent symptoms are much more likely to be caused by MBS than due to poor posture. So again, just the focus on posture really takes away from the real work of what's going on. And it's kind of like this perfectionist dream of like, if I just have perfect posture all the time, I won't have pain. We know that's not true either. Some days I have a couple hours a day to spend on the program, but some days I don't have any time. Is it okay to work on 1 week's material for 2 weeks rather than one? Yes, you can go at your own pace and do find a good balance. So make sure that you do make time to work on the program so you get its benefit. You deserve to get better, and you need to take time in order to do the work that's required. So don't put a ton of pressure on yourself. Don't rush yourself. If you have a timetable for your healing, that will probably take longer. But also, if it's been really hard to make time for yourself, that's when you might want to look at like, how can I make time for this self-care for myself to go through this program and give myself some time to work on it. How do I deal with people who doubt the mind body symptom concept? They're always telling me to go to the doctor again to see if there's a physical problem. This makes me doubt myself, and then I find that my pain is worse. So doubts are common, of course. This is what our brain is going to come up with. And if it makes your pain worse, then you actually know that it's mind body. So think of it that way. And then just thinking of like who you're talking to, many people don't understand mind body syndrome. So it's probably a good idea not to discuss this with them. Definitely, it can make your pain worse when you're talking about it and questioning it, and people, give you this weird look, and then you doubt yourself. So, generally, it's what I advise is just like maybe you give a very brief, I'm working on decreasing my stress and that decreases my pain. And most people get that like if you regulate your nervous system and decrease your stress, then you'll have less pain. And so, they probably don't understand about repressed emotions and that emotions cause pain. Like that's a little too deep to get into. But I suggest like sometimes people will ask, like, how do I respond to this? If someone, says some kind of comment about what I'm doing, either in a good way, like, oh, you look a lot better. What have you been doing? Or they're like, oh, you're really limping today. Just kind of do some kind of acknowledgement. Oh, yeah, thanks for noticing. And then change the subject if you can. Just go back to them. Oh, tell me about your new dog that you just got, or what do you think about, that football game we just watched, or whatever, right? So just because people ask, it doesn't mean that we have to give them a huge explanation. And a lot of us are people pleasers. And so we want to kind of like make that person happy and we want to look good. And so just realize like you can come up with some responses that are simple and don't go into detail, and then you can just change the subject. And then do find people who support who believe in mind body syndrome if you want support. So there's like the Tell Me About Your Pain Facebook group. That's where probably a lot of you found out about me. And there are other, I have a group coaching program, for example, that's just full of people who all believe this same kind of thing. And so when they have their doubts, you can come here and talk to people who get it. Question. I'm just starting my first week of this course, and I have a question about reprogramming the mind. I think this is a key to my recovery as I've identified some strong triggers that I've not been able to keep from causing my symptoms in the past. Most of the triggers are involved with work, and they make doing my job difficult while also causing me fear. How can I deal with these triggers? So this is a common one. We start to recognize our triggers, and then we're like, oh, it's this major part of my life, work, or it's my spouse, or right. So then they're like, what, do I just need to switch jobs, get divorced? But the thing is, sometimes we're just like, oh, it's this job, and then we leave, but we go with the same mindset. And so then we actually get another job where we're in that same situation again, or we get another partner that seems to act just like our spouse did. So if we're not resolving the issues in the first place, then chances are just leaving your job won't really do that much good, because, if you're a really stressed out person, then you just stress out about not having a job, or then you stress out about the new job. And so triggers are just things that initiate symptoms, but they're not directly causing them. So you don't need to eliminate the trigger, just that connection that you're making. So if you think of, he gives that example of Pavlov's dogs, where he trained them to respond to the bell and they salivated. They didn't actually need to get rid of the bell for them to stop salivating. And I guess Pavlov actually untrained his dogs as well to stop salivating when they heard the bell by not reinforcing the food. And so all you need to do is figure out, what you're making that trigger mean, and see if you can address it that way. And then you might still be able to keep your job or keep your spouse, which would be nice. And so figure out why work is a trigger for you. If it's work, look at any issues that are occurring at work and figure out if you can continue to work there and what you can do to change things. So I've had people, for example, that their boss, might use an angry tone, and they're kind of more just a loud person, and it feels like maybe like their dad who used to yell at them. And so they're when they hear that yelling, or, an angry voice, then they go back to like being this child and going into freeze. And, it's basically like their nervous system is like, hey, you're not safe here. And so when they can start to see, oh, this is not my dad. This doesn't mean I'm in trouble. This doesn't, right? If you can kind of diffuse what those thoughts are about the situation, then most times you're able to stay in that situation without being triggered. And then find ways of stopping your pain at work. So persistently talk to yourself prior to going to work, while entering work, and at work. Tell your mind that your body doesn't need to have these symptoms anymore. Get immersed in your job. Stay focused on doing the very best you can, and focus on enjoying any aspects of the job that you can, and be grateful for having a job. So any of these kind of reframing thought processes can be really helpful. And then reminding your body that you're safe constantly, basically, is helpful. But definitely, like, job and not having a job or money situations can be stressful events for us. So just being sensitive to that. You can make the decision to find another job and leave, and know that you're not trapped and that you have an exit strategy. So maybe that is the solution. Maybe the job is really not a healthy place for you, but you can remind your brain that you'll look out for yourself, you'll take care of yourself, know this will not be forever, and that you'll be able to handle it until you can leave. Learn to relax and not worry if symptoms develop. So if you do have the symptom, that's okay, because the more you worry, the more you'll have the symptom. So it may be uncomfortable, but it's not harming you. So doesn't have to be that you're perfect at never having a symptom, but if it does come up, the way you deal with it and handle it will affect how long it stays around. After starting the program, I'm finding that my symptoms are getting worse. Am I doing something wrong? This has made me be anxious, and that seems to make my pain worse. I'm also feeling depressed and tired. Should I stop the program or go slower with it? So remember, it's common for symptoms to become worse or for new symptoms to emerge when starting the program, especially with the writing exercises. First, because you're uncovering emotions that have been buried. And second, the mind is catching on that physical symptoms are from unresolved emotions. So it will tend to create other symptoms to keep you off track or scare you into stopping this work. Your mind is trying to give you the message that this work is too hard or scary. When this work causes your symptoms to change, you're actually on the right track. So thinking of it that way, it doesn't mean I've regressed and this won't work for me. It actually means I'm on the right track. I've got it on the run. So if you do need pain or anxiety medication for the short term, that's fine. Also consider a counselor or coach or therapist, right? Someone who understands this and you can talk to, um, because treating anxiety is actually the same exact way that we treat pain. So you could write to the negativity and depression or talk to it, tell it that you know what it's trying to do. So this is so common, you guys. Like almost everyone that I've seen, their symptoms go down and then they might get more anxious. Or I have a client right now that's feeling a lot of fatigue and depression. And she's like, oh, this is just so frustrating. How long is this going to last? And um, just knowing that it's normal. And this is just one of the strategies the brain is using to try to keep you in this, subconscious pain producing state, because even though it isn't comfortable, the brain feels safer doing it this way than going to those unresolved emotions that it's been packing down for years and years. Question, I'm either waking up in the middle of the night or I wake up with pain. How can I deal with those things that are occurring while I sleep? So when you're asleep, that's mainly your subconscious. So you need to deal with your subconscious. Here's a few ways. Before you go to bed each night, write out a list of things on your mind. So you're writing out all the things you've been thinking about today or tomorrow, what you're thinking about, and you write, I'll deal with these tomorrow. I'll not worry about them at all tonight while I sleep. So just writing can be really, really helpful before bed. So we're just getting all that stuff out of our mind and onto paper. And then that, reminder of yourself, I don't need to deal with these tonight. And then do a meditation or visualization before bed. That can help. Before you fall asleep, have a little chat with your brain and its danger signal. Let it know that you're okay, you're going to be okay, that there are no major issues that need attending to tonight. Some people are in a habit of like solving their problems in their sleep. Like I had one physician that was told, like, if you go to bed thinking about something, then you'll wake up with a solution. But what she'd gotten into the habit of is waking up at 3 a.m. and having anxiety and not getting it back to sleep and then having more pain the next day. So just kind of what we did is just helping her realize, like, I'm not going to solve my best problems in the middle of the night. This is not a time to think about those things. This is not where I'm getting my best ideas. And then she was able to reverse that. And then and then tell your brain that it can keep you awake or wake you up as it pleases, but you're not afraid of that. Sometimes that's a really hard one because we really believe, like, I need to get sleep. But especially when you're trying to sleep, then it's harder to sleep. You've probably noticed that. So if you have more of that attitude of like, oh, if I'm awake or not, it's going to be fine. I can make it through a day and then I'll be tired for tomorrow night or whatever. So, and another phrase that I use a lot is like, my body will get the rest it needs to when it needs it, because eventually you'll get some sleep. So know that you will sleep better over time, that if you don't sleep well tonight, you'll sleep better tomorrow or the next night. And do this each night for 2 weeks and you'll sleep better and your morning pain will lessen or go away. Oh, okay. So there's a question. I have kind of the opposite sleep thing. My symptoms often disappear completely when I'm dozing off and return when I'm alert or awake. How would you interpret this? Yeah, I mean, definitely that could still fall under the category of mind body. I don't know if you're questioning that part of it. But just realizing like, okay, well, at least for right now, maybe I've associated sleep with safety, or my pain is less when I sleep. So that could just be kind of that conditioning or programmed behavior. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not mind body if you don't have this particular symptom of waking up with pain. So I would interpret it as, that's kind of nice, right? It's kind of nice that my brain hasn't tried to keep me up with pain. And then when you are awake and alert, then that might be where your conscious mind is a little more active. And some of those patterns of, worry, fear, anxiety, or those personality traits are showing up, and that's why you're having pain when you're alert and awake. Question: I was doing really well when I started the program. My pain was going down and I was beginning to feel good for the first time in several years. Then my pain returned and now it seems worse than ever. What did I do wrong? I'm worried that it won't go away again and that I'll be stuck back where I was. What should I do? You guys, this is so common where people are like, oh, I guess I wasn't meditating enough because my pain came back. Oh, I guess I haven't been doing the program hard enough, or I haven't been like as consistent enough. It doesn't mean any of that necessarily. Setbacks are common, they occur in most people. Be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up or blame yourself for this setback. And that's like the number one thing I see people do is blame themselves. Oh, it's because I wasn't doing it right. I didn't do it enough. So don't let fear overtake you when you have a setback, because that will lead to more pain. Sometimes the danger signal in the brain just falls back into default circuits of pain for a while. Sometimes the brain ramps up symptoms before they go down as a temporary reaction to the changes you're making, right? It's like, you're making all these changes and the brain's like, hey, wait, we like being like this in some way. It's predictable, even if it's uncomfortable. So it's normal the symptoms can go up. Remind yourself that you're healthy and strong, that this is a temporary setback. You will be fine soon. Be assertive, continue to do more physical activities, do the writing and the meditations. Don't fall into seeing yourself as a victim. Develop confidence in yourself and your ability to heal yourself. This shall pass. You will get better. Compassion for yourself is so important, though. Okay, question. I'm confused about what foods I should eat. I have gotten conflicting information. Some say to avoid wheat and dairy products. Others say to go to organic or vegan. Does food cause or aggravate bodily pains? He does say, for some people, they have allergies, right? You have a peanut allergy or something. And that can be determined by blood tests. But also we hear a lot of things about, things like sugar causing inflammation, or that there are common triggers. Like if you have IBS, certain food groups are supposed to be bad for IBS. But many people are able to resolve their reactions to foods by simply applying the reprogramming in the brain techniques of the brain techniques in this book. So that's commonly what we see, especially with things like IBS. And I've gone through this too, of thinking like, oh, coffee is causing my pain and digestive problems. And then noticing that even when I just thought about coffee, my stomach started hurting. So I knew there was a lot of predictive coding there. And then Dr. Schubiner likes to talk a lot about inflammation, because there's what he calls microinflammation that, yeah, maybe if you have, you eat a bunch of cake or something, even if it does cause some inflammation, it would be this microinflammation. And first of all, it would not just happen within a few minutes or hours, it would be kind of over days. And then also, that level of inflammation does not cause body pain. So usually when they're saying like, oh, you have tendinitis, you have inflammation there, eating sugar wouldn't necessarily affect that, because it's more due to the mind-body syndrome, and it's more, macro inflammation. If they're looking at a specific area that's inflamed, the microinflammation is just like you have it throughout your whole body and it doesn't cause mind-body symptoms. So from the MBS point of view, it's important to understand that you can eat whatever you want, whatever feels good, and whatever makes you happy. It will make no difference in pain or mind-body syndrome. Many people worry too much. So this is for sure what I see. We're so likely as humans, when we have pain, to think of, what did I just do, or what did I just eat? That's like where our brain goes. It must be the food or it must be the activity. So get out of that paradigm. Foods are safe. And sometimes those really restrictive diets, those are causing you stress. So getting to the point where you're starting to, just with this graded exposure, tolerate more foods and eat more foods, that will probably decrease your stress level if you're not so stressed about it all the time. Because usually the foods that we're told to avoid are ones that we really like. So I like Dr. Schubiner's approach. He's kind of more a moderation in all things kind of person than, just restrict whole food groups or, just eat the cleanest possible so you don't have pain. It doesn't really affect that. Why does my mind come up with new symptoms when I get rid of one of the old ones? When will it give it up? So, a few things to think about here. One, the diagnosis of mind body syndrome is confirmed because a structural problem in one area would not move around like that. So, you've got it on the run. So, if this happens, it's mind body. One symptom goes down and then the other comes up. My right shoulder stops hurting and then my left shoulder starts. Then that's mind body. And then another thing you can think of, you haven't yet integrated the changes that you need to make in your life or in your psyche. So it could be that example of like, okay, you're still really being a people pleaser or you're still being really hard on yourself. So even though that pain is gone, now, you start to have some hand pain or whatever. So it could be a chance to look at, how you're treating yourself. You haven't fully accepted yourself completely. You're still fighting yourself, doubting yourself, being afraid of symptoms or certain issues or events in your life. It could be that you haven't yet learned what you need to learn from your symptoms. And again, usually that points back to like emotions that weren't resolved or survival states we're going into that are these personality traits that cause chronic pain. The brain can easily fall back into that danger mode just because it's used to doing that. Basically, it is a habit of your brain. Habits can change, and your brain will do this less often over time as you continue to calm your brain. Remind yourself that you're okay and focus on living the best life that you can. Almost everyone gets symptom substitution. And if you're able to recognize it quickly and even laugh at the new symptom, like, isn't it funny that my body thinks it can get away with trying that one? Then you're more likely to rid yourself of mind body syndrome symptoms soon. So, yeah, the more you can just be like, oh, this is curious. Wow. I had this happen where I had some tooth pain and it went into my face and it started producing numbness up to my cheek. And I was just so skeptical because I knew nothing structural was going on. I really didn't think it was. And so I was like, wow, that's interesting that my brain can create all these sensations. And within a day or two, it was gone. And so, just the more you can take on that attitude of like, okay, this is interesting, this is curious. Oh, it's even kind of funny, then that can help. But that's hard. It's not saying that's easy, right? Oh, okay. Angela says, when he said you haven't yet accepted yourself fully and completely, you're still fighting yourself. This hits for me. I reject some of my personality traits as undesirable, and it leads to trying to behave in ways that are unnatural for me, which leads to anxiety, frustration, beating myself up, etc. Need to accept myself as it is and be fine with it. Ah, so good. I'm glad you had that insight. Um, yeah, could be any one of those things. It could be a combination of those things. But again, like thinking of this as a lifestyle change. So it's not like you're just going to like do these things for 30 days, your pain goes away, you never have another symptom. It's like, hey, you learned as a child, maybe not to be your whole self and to be small and to not be too much. And so you've lived this life of shrinking yourself down or being a people pleaser or trying to be a perfectionist so people would like you. And if you keep doing that, that is not a healthy way to live. So it's actually really cool that this process helps us with things that you might address with a therapist or with coaching, even if you didn't have pain, right? Like these are behaviors that are not sustainable for a healthy life if you're always, making yourself small and doing what others want rather than what you want, or over giving so much that you're not doing any self-care. Like those things do need to change, and then you will be better able to show up in your life. Okay, so how do I deal with anxiety? I worry if I'm not, or sorry, I worry if I'm going to get better and if this pain will come back. The mind often uses anxiety as a symptom substitution. Yeah, like that's so, so true. So your back pain goes down, but anxiety goes up. When anxiety occurs, it means that emotions are less suppressed. So you're doing these writing exercises, you're getting some of this stuff to come up. And so you have more anxiety about it, but it makes sense because you're also um, feeling your feelings more. So accept that you have these feelings at times. There are reasons for them and that they are normal. And then you can treat the anxiety just as you've learned to treat the pain. And he does have, so meaning like you don't necessarily follow every single anxious thought. You go back into the body, you do somatic tracking, you remind yourself you're safe, you do meditations. So it's really cool thinking of it that way. In fact, next, I think I want to do that book for book club, Unlearn Your Anxiety and Depression, just because I see anxiety so commonly in everyone that I work with, most everyone, anxiety or depression. And so just realizing that can be treated through the same exact way that we're treating chronic pain. So if you've already done it in one area, you know how to do it. We just need to apply it to anxiety. So he has a meditation where it's talking about just thoughts. These are just thoughts. He said there's a stepping into fear meditation on Ronald Siegel's website, and then embracing your emotions meditation. So just keep reminding yourself, this is normal. This is just a sensation. It's just a danger signal, but it doesn't mean anything's really wrong. And your anxiety will get less and less. You talk about forgiveness, but isn't that condoning what someone else did? So remember, there's that chapter on forgiveness, and that can be kind of controversial because sometimes people are like, well, I don't want to say it's okay that someone abused me. And that's not what we're saying. We're not saying that at all. Forgiveness has little to do with the other people. Whether they deserve to be forgiven is irrelevant. But by not forgiving, you're allowing the other person to control you and to continue to hurt you. So you're basically deciding to hurt yourself. So forgiving asserts your power to choose how you think and how you act. So forgiving can be seen as something that's strong, not something that's weak. And it definitely doesn't mean that you're okay with someone abusing someone. That's never okay. But you're also starting to see like, hey, that person had their own issues. It had nothing to do with me. I'm not going to take the blame for this anymore. And I'm not going to allow that person to continue to hurt me by having this victim role that I'm in, because now, I'm starting to see that I'm a powerful person, maybe even despite or because of that happening, right? In another chapter, he talks about post-traumatic growth. I think it's where he talks about forgiveness. So that's a tricky one, right? Like be so patient with yourself and compassionate with yourself, but the end goal is not to live with this resentment forever because that only hurts us. So back to food with IBS, eggs seem to be a trigger. Could my brain believe they're a problem if every time I eat them, there's pain? Yeah, exactly. See that little experiment that I did, like just thinking about eggs and just see how your body reacts. That was such a good clue for me that, just thinking about coffee made my stomach actually hurt. So it's just like, if you had food poisoning once and you think of that food later, you could have a body reaction, even just thinking of that food. So for sure, your brain could associate eggs with pain or symptoms. And then in the future, if you have eggs or even a little bit of an egg in something, then you could produce that symptom just from predictive coding. Absolutely. Why do the symptoms of MBS keep coming back after they get better? Is my mind that persistent? Yes, your mind is very persistent. And here's this analogy that I love. Like mind body syndrome is like a child throwing a temper tantrum. So if every time the child throws the temper tantrum, you just like give them everything they want, then they learn that that's how they get things they want. I don't really get anything unless I throw a temper tantrum and then my mom gives me everything I want, right? So it's better to actually ignore the child, make sure they're safe or whatever, not in danger, but don't react with fear or worry. And then this will get the tantrums to stop temporarily at first. So if the kid, they're at the supermarket and they're just crying and crying for some, candy or something, if you ignore them, if you don't give them the candy and reinforce it, then eventually they learn to stop doing that. But the child will continue to test you. So that's what you can think of with these extinction bursts. And extinction burst is another way of saying a symptom imperative, which is another way of saying, a new symptom coming up or an old one coming back. And that, remember, the extinction burst analogy, they talk about this in The Way Out, is from this experiment they did with rats hitting a button and getting food. And the button actually broke, I think, in the experiment. And so when the rats were pushing the button, they weren't getting food, but they didn't immediately just stop pushing the button. They actually pushed it more and more and more, and they did it faster and harder. And then eventually they learned that it wasn't giving them the food, so they stopped, but they didn't initially just stop pushing the button first time they realized there was no food. They actually ramped it up a little bit before it became extinct. So that's what might be going on. So you are human and you'll always be human. Having some mind-body reactions from time to time is simply part of being human. Everyone has them to some degree. If you can accept yourself as being human and not perfect, if you can accept yourself as being okay just as you are, if you can accept yourself as doing the best that you can, then you will gradually calm the danger signal in your brain and be the person that you were meant to be. So that is the end. That is the end of the book. Oh, we're just right about at time, but maybe if there are any, I've seen those questions in the comments and tried to address them, but if there are any last comments that you want to make or questions that you have? Ooh, Judson Brewer. This isn't from the book Unwinding Anxiety, which is a good one. I've read that. Forgiveness is giving up hope of a better past. Ooh, yeah, I like that. Because you can't change the past. Can't wish enough to change how your parents treated you. But at least if we can give up that hope, then we can, move on. Ooh, I love that. Okay. Maybe this is it, you guys. Thank you so much for joining. Those of you who have joined and participated, and if you're listening back, I really, oh yeah, I really like the idea of doing the anxiety book next. Yeah, I think it has to happen. I really want to, I actually have that book and I've had it for like a year and not read all of it. And what I've heard is the first 5 chapters are different, but the exercise part is actually all the same. So, we already know how we're going to treat it, but definitely like understanding anxiety and depression as being mind body is a huge piece to, not believing in it and not perpetuating it. So look out for announcements for that. I might take a week off or something, and I want to contact Dr. Schubiner again and see if I can get the PDF, because that really helps me with making the slides. So as long as I can get the PDF for that, I'm so down to do that. And we might just keep the same day of the week and time, but stay tuned for more information. I haven't totally planned that out yet. Okay, thanks everyone. Take care. Have a great rest of your day. And hopefully we'll see you soon in the next book club. And yes, can we listen to the recording? Yes, I post the recordings on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. It's Body and Mind Life Coach. And I also post them, if you're in that Tell Me About Your Pain Facebook group, I post them there. But yeah, on my YouTube channel, there'll be all of the recordings from Tell Me About Your Pain. I've also done a book club on The Way Out. And I've also done a book club on Anchored by Deb Dana. That's a lot more into the nervous system stuff and how to be more regulated and feel better in your body that way. So I like doing these book clubs, and there's lots of back stuff you can listen to if you're just finding me. And I also have a podcast. If you're wanting more things to listen to, it's all in alignment with this stuff. It's called Unstoppable Body and Mind. So I have some meditations for anxiety there. And my last episode was actually called Unlearning Anxiety. So hopefully you'll be able to follow me in some of those places and we can keep in touch that way. All right. Thanks, guys. Take care. Bye.